Welcome to the Aligned Mommas Podcast. We are so grateful that you tuned back in. Today, we have a very special guest with us. His name is Rory Paquette. He actually, we met through podcasting, actually. He invited us to join his show a few weeks back, and we started talking about faith, which we actually didn't expect to talk about during that episode. That turned into us asking him to come on the show. We always love the male perspective on faith and all things fatherhood and being a husband. So, welcome to the show, Rory. If you don't mind sharing a little bit about your podcast, who you are, what you do, and then we'll just dive in from there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it very much. And yeah, it was a little unexpected when that conversation broke out, but I just kind of let the Holy Spirit lead me in those things. You folks answered a couple of questions and referenced your faith, and I said, I think it's time to bring that up. So anyway, here we are. I have three podcasts, and I am a podcast coach. And I'm a men's life coach. So I have a lot that I'm doing. The three podcasts are the Power of Man, the Podcaster Nation, and the one I just launched, Wake Up the Lions, which is blowing up and doing great. And yeah, other than that, I'm a husband and a father of three grown kids, and I'm just happy to be here.
Awesome. We are so happy to have you. First
Thanks.
question: how did you even fall into podcasting?
Wow, yeah, that's kind of loaded. But I I listened to some other podcasts. I was a big fan of podcasts, and so I was listening to several. I was listening to one where the guy who was hosting it, who back then was worth following and today is not, so I'm not going to name his name. But he was talking about how there needs to be more safe places for men, so to speak. And this was kind of during the masculinity is bad, everything is toxic. No, really,
Yeah.
we were under fire all over the place. And that was bothering me a lot. I was taking a lot of notes, and I was in the process of writing a book about it. And I heard this gentleman talking about how we needed to have more movements online and that type of thing. And I realized that I was listening to one. And I said, he's doing this. I have a decent voice. So I can figure this out. And so I said, I'm going to put together a podcast, and I'm going to talk to fathers and husbands and see if I can help guide them through the stuff that I didn't have any guidance through, and that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I went through a rough spot and I felt very alone. And so I said, I don't want anybody to ever feel that way again. So if I can be that voice and I can help one person not feel alone during that time, then it'll be worth all the work. And so I started trying to figure out how to do it.
Amazing.
Love
First,
that.
firstly, you do have a podcast voice. Very,
Yeah.
it's like a perfect radio voice. I
Yeah.
will say
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
that.
What were you doing? Because you do this full time now, correct?
Yep, that's right.
So I was just gonna ask, like, what were you doing before, and how long did it take you to get to the place where you were able to transition to full-time podcaster?
Yeah, great question. I've been in sales most of my life.
Mhm.
So different types of sales. I've sold pretty much everything from like every type of advertising, insurance, real estate, chiropractic service. I mean, you name it, I've sold it somewhere along the way. And it used to be a great way to make a living. Now that I'm an old guy, it doesn't really work that well. I started podcasting 6 years ago, and it took me about 4 years to really start looking at it like, hey, this is an income, like an actual income. And again, I didn't have anybody showing me the way.
Mhm.
Any podcast coach or guru or anybody out there at the time wanted, $25,000 to show you how to do simple monetization. It was just like, come on. If I had the
Yeah.
money to pay a guy like that, I wouldn't need to,
Right.
get money for my podcast.
Right.
So there was a lot of that, but I kind of figured it out one step at a time. I took some very, very creative routes, which if you want to talk about, we can. But I used a lot of my sales background and entrepreneurial background to say, how can I just think outside of the box and make some money while I'm doing this podcast? And it worked. And so for the last 2 years, I've been doing podcasting and podcast coaching and men's coaching full time.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
thanks.
awesome.
We would love to hear your angles on marriage, faith, and being a dad. And I don't know in what order we want to touch or whatnot, but and I know that's a very open-ended question, but what you already mentioned, you said, hey, I was in a really rough time. I was very alone, and I was looking around, and nobody was there to help me. And we've mentioned on several podcasts, women, have so many mentors throughout their life, especially if they have a decent community around them. but men don't. And there's so many wives that are in our community right now, so many that we can just rattle off names and think of. And they're like, they're falling into faith, they're falling into God and the way. They're seeing the light and the beauty and all of it, but it seems like they're just trying to drag their husbands into it. And from my experience, anytime I talk to my husband about faith, it doesn't help get him closer. He needs the male mentors. And we're oftentimes looking around and he's good in his faith. We can always grow, we can always expand, but we've talked about where are the male mentors? We firmly believe in masculinity and how God created men. But what is the issue this day? Do you see why we don't have those male mentors? Even those of the faith come out and fulfill the duty I feel like they have.
Yeah. You guys really, I mean, you had some questions that could go like anywhere. I love this.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's one of those, how much time you got, type of thing. Let's start with the first question in faith and men and that type of thing. In order to be a man in today's world, and you're already being vilified for everything that you're trying to do. You want to be strong. You want to be a provider. You want to be a protector. You want to lead. And too often people see that and they say, "Oh, well, does that mean your wife can't protect, the kids?" No. Does that mean your wife doesn't help you lead? No. It doesn't mean any of those things. It simply means that you have to. You don't have an option. You are, the father, you're the husband, you've got to step up. If there's 4 people at the table and there's 3 pieces of chicken, you're the one that doesn't eat because you're the one that should have provided that extra piece. People don't get that.
Wow.
And what has
And
happened
they
over the last,
shame that way of thinking versus why are we not leveling up? Right? It's
right.
shame to think instead of, don't you feel the most whole when you do provide?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And we fall into that like, okay, I'm ashamed of this and now I want to go hide or I want to make an excuse. And because of the way the world is, they've really started cultivating men to take the easy way out, to just lean into an excuse or say, I'm too tired. I need to take care of me, all this other kind of nonsense that I hear out there. You have to fill your own cup before you can fill somebody else's. I totally get that. But if nobody's cup is full, whose fault is that? So, there's a second part. There's an asterisk to all of these, cute little sayings that are right. But when it comes to being men, unfortunately, they're not, and they really don't apply. When it comes to faith, we're being asked now to put all of our belief and our faith in someone other than ourselves. That's very, very tough to do for a lot of men because we've been raised to be self-reliant. We've been raised to think we are the ones who have to. So you either have men who have shied away from masculinity and leadership and protector and provider, and they don't have the backbone and the wherewithal to embrace faith because they're afraid of that too.
Pride in it? Is it too humbling to like what do you think is the biggest, if you could, or top 2 things of that prevents men? Does it make them feel less masculine? Because I do feel like and having conversations with my husband, a lot of times the male figures, the religious male figures, or those in the faith that we see around might not be the most masculine ones. And I feel like there's that stereotype of, oh, I must be like him and no way. And I'm like, God made you who you are. You can be in the faith how God made you. So
Even that statement right there, I think is part of the problem, to be honest. Not that you're doing something wrong, but I don't believe that, and I don't think men do. That I think God made me who I am in terms of what he gave me to work with, but it is up to me. And so I think it's still on me to have that free will to follow through, and I think that what happens is, let's say you have a leader of a church who's, kind of a marshmallow and, not real strong, kind of a pushover, physically isn't taking care of himself, so on and so forth, then that's not how God made him. That's just my opinion.
That's good.
God
No, we
gave,
are with
gave
you.
him,
True. Yeah.
gave him the ability to be whatever he wanted to be. He chose that. And one of the reasons he chose that is because he doesn't have that dedication and that fortitude to, enforce it on himself. So when you see leaders like that, and at least when men see leaders like that, we don't embrace that. We look at that and we say, you don't have any discipline for yourself, and yet you're telling me what I should or should not be doing in my life. It's kind of hard. And men don't follow leaders easily. We really don't. Folks in my age group especially, we seem to have had issues with our dads. like a lot more common than I thought before I started working with my own men's groups and working with
Mm,
veterans and things like that. There is a lot of old hurt with guys my age and a little bit younger in terms of how we were brought up back then. You know, the Gen
mm,
X men didn't exactly get very good fathering most of the time. So we're in a position where we're having to make up for that.
Mhm.
And so we go into it going, I'm not going to be him. I'm going to be better than him. I'm not going to let that happen to me. And I'm going to make sure my sons, my kids are not going to follow in that path either. When you take all of that on and you have all that responsibility and you feel all that shame if it doesn't happen, turning over the reins to somebody else, even if it's God, is very tough. It's very tough to do. It's very hard to wrap your head around it until you kind of realize that God is there. He is willing to take the reins, but he's still not going to do the job for you.
mm,
You know, he's kind of like the bumpers on a bowling lane. You know, he's not going to let you go rolling into that lane over there, but it's not up to him whether or not you throw a strike. You
Yeah.
still have to do that yourself.
And you got to
I hope
walk
that
in
answers the question a
obedience.
little bit.
Well, what
mm.
about the wife so what would you say to the wife now that she's and we have these anonymous posts in our community group. It's happened a few times and just talking with women, she's just found God, found the freedom, taste and see how good he is. And she knows what we know now. And he's just not there and she's frustrated and she doesn't know what to do. What would you say to her and her role and what she should do? Any advice for her?
Yeah. When my daughter went through a stage where she wanted to be a vegetarian, um, I very easily could have said, you know what, that's going to require new meals for everybody. We can't even afford this. How are we going to put this together? I could have said, look, no, you're not. Instead, I said, okay, no problem. And I set about making vegetable alternatives for every single thing in the world and just totally embraced it. About 2 weeks later, she said, yeah, thanks for that, but I'm kind of done. I think I'm going to make my own decision to have that hamburger over there because it looks great. With men, the more you push and the more you tell and the more you order and the more you try to dictate, men instantly put up a wall.
Mhm.
We instantly put up a wall. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get through it eventually, but when it comes to God, especially, I rejected God for decades. It was decades. My wife was in the faith and kept leaving the door open and kept leaving the door open and showing me how beautiful it was in certain ways in her life. And even then, I was like, yeah, that's great for you. But you know what? I got to take care of this. It's my job. I don't see God helping me anywhere.
Mhm.
Okay. When we went through some really hard times, I didn't see God there. Okay. I took care of it
Yeah.
myself. And so most men have that. And if they're getting that from their wives too, then the very first thing they're going to do is go, no, no, no. They're going to shut it out even harder because now they feel like they're being ordered to go find God. Nobody can be told to go find God. Whether you're a husband, wife, doesn't matter. You have to open, you can't receive anything with the closed fist. You got to open yourself up to God before he can get in. So it really, the worst thing I think you can do is hammer on your husband and try to force it. The best thing to do is to be inviting about it and say, hey, you want to go to church with me? No? Okay, fine. Let it go. You want to read the Bible with me? You want to look at this? Leave it open, leave the door open, leave it non-threatening. And even if he obeys and puts his head down and goes to church with you, God's not getting in there unless he lets him.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
And I think too, today, like in our culture and in America society, we just watered down the power of prayer. And I know it seems like the typical Christian like pray about it, but I think of like the war room praying about it like on your knees, quoting scripture, decreeing, declaring, anointing your home with oil, walking around, walking outside your home and just like keep on asking fervently, praying God's word to him. And your word says this, Lord, and like standing on it and knowing, having the faith that God will move that mountain, but you can't give up. I always think of Elijah when he was passing, the prophet was taking over, and he beat on the ground, and he's like, "Why'd you stop at 3 or 4 times? You should have kept beating 6, 7 times." And that's what I think of when you're in in prayer. Like it has to be like a fervent, consistent prayer. I've heard so many stories, but I just think that our culture has like watered it down. We think it's just a simple like, Lord, please let them seek you, and then like we're done and we move on and we stop there. And it's like, no, keep pounding the ground, keep asking and being bold in that. I think a prayerful wife is more powerful than we think.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I think it's a great instance for the wife in that particular situation to lead in that area and say, okay, not only am I just going to leave this open for him and let him do it at his own pace, but I'm going to show him the power I'm finding in this. I'm going to show him the strength that I'm getting in this. When a husband sees his wife becoming more powerful before his very eyes, becoming happier, becoming more peaceful, he's not going to miss that.
Mhm.
And then we just let our own stuff get in the way. And
Mhm.
there's a big difference between hammering away in how you approach it and how you leave it open, and I think it gets confused with hammering on your husband,
Yeah.
type of thing. I love what you're talking about. Put all your power into prayer. Ask God to help you with it. Do
Mhm.
everything you just talked about. The whole, for lack of a better, phrase, ritual, of everything
Mhm.
that it goes through. Love that, and
Mhm.
and ask for help. God is going to put Himself in your husband's life, one way or another. He's going to find a way. But even God makes us do it on our own time and makes us say yes.
Mhm.
Please,
I
come
think
here.
of the parable of the widow and the judge. Even though that judge was
Mhm.
like an evil and cruel man and he hated God, he hated her. She was so annoying. And even the unrighteous judge gave in to her. How much more will God and do it speedily? So I think of that so much. And the prayer of the righteous availeth much. You have to have faith too, and you have to
Mhm.
walk in obedience. We have some friends right now that are really fighting in marriage. And it's really hard, whether we're talking about the faith or not. And just being married for 18 years together with my husband for 21 years, slowly I find, even though he seems so confident and, content and all these things, little by little, you discover how much men are fearful of failing and failing us and all these things. And we do have some good friends that it seems like their husbands aren't putting in certain efforts that they should be, and just even like meeting the basic needs and whatnot, the role of a dad and the responsibilities and just the pressure. Is there anything you could talk to on that? And I don't know, just encourage wives to go about situations in different ways versus like picking at things or nagging at things that can only then push that self-esteem lower.
When it comes to that kind of thing, let me start with um, a substance abuse type of thing is a whole different issue than if it's a lack of drive, lack of belief, those types of things. When you add a substance abuse problem in there, or some sort of addiction, whatever that is, that takes on a whole different set of circumstances in terms of how the man has to heal himself and how he has to proceed. So if it's a
And
case
shame
where
involved in that too.
100%,
Yeah.
especially depending on what it is.
Hmm.
There are a lot of these things that bring on a lot more shame than others. Maybe we can just kind of leave that at that. Um, so if it's a problem like that, um, there's a whole lot going on with the husband that's causing those things. The husband doesn't get that way because of the regularness of life. A husband gets that way when he has nowhere else to go. A husband gets that way when he has lost hope and doesn't see a way out. And what I have found, I've got several men's groups that I work with, all through my private, group. If I can plug it, Power of Man
Oh,
Within.
no, you can.
Yeah.
We're going to ask you about your new podcast too.
Well, appreciate
Yeah.
it. But in there, we do a lot of talking
Mhm.
about these types of things, and a lot of it goes back to my story, and stuff that I had to deal with. But my father was an alcoholic and really enjoyed just drinking and beating the living daylights out of it. But all of that had nothing to do with the people that he was beating up. It had to do with what was going on inside of him.
Mhm.
He was at a point where he could not achieve any of the goals he wanted. He could not figure out how to get out of that box. He knew he was a failure and knew he couldn't meet the basic needs of providing. If you can't get a hold of a man in that spot and help turn him around, help give him options, help give him support when he needs it, that's when he turns to those other vices. And that's when those things come in, because a man who turns to, any of those addictive things is simply saying, I have lost. I cannot win, and I have to do something to ease the pain because I can't live with myself. So very often that substance abuse is what's keeping that man from becoming suicidal. And the men who reject the substance abuse and then do nothing to take care of the situation they're in, they're the ones who become suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
And so people don't really realize how close those two things are. And so I don't know if that helps at all.
That
But
does
in terms
help.
of,
So would women in those situations, I actually have two that I'm thinking of now, very similar situations, but they seek mentors, like godly, like, is there any advice? Is there any just thing that you can recommend?
yes. So for the wives in these situations, it's a very helpless feeling because you're sitting there and you're like, I need to do something. I'm watching my husband, my family just, go deeper and deeper and deeper. Very often they can start to lead by example also. And they can say, all right, you know what? I'm going to go get another job then, even if they aren't. They can introduce male mentorship
Mhm.
in a way that's not, excuse me, that's not, you have to go talk to this guy,
Yeah. Doesn't seem
or,
forced.
hey, right, you have to listen to this. They can introduce that sort of thing. If you're in the kitchen and you're making dinner and you're playing some music or something, put on, Power Man podcast or something like that you're listening to now. And then he's going to hear it whether he wants to or not. There's all sorts of subtle things you can do, but the picking up the baseball bat and hitting him over the head, you're literally beating a dead horse because inside he's dead. He's gone. He's already given up, or he wouldn't be reaching to stop the pain.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing is to realize that when your husband starts to numb the pain, he's given up
Yeah.
on trying to fix it. So he needs another avenue. He needs something out of the box. He needs a change of scenery, perspective. He needs a new voice in his ear.
He's
It
a
would be
very
great.
encouraging wife,
Yeah.
like the small
Mhm.
wins, and
Any
the
small win.
tenderness, scratch his head at night. Like even if he didn't deserve it, right?
Hmm.
Do little things that, make him feel special. And again, it's the small wins that you can encourage.
Yeah. Say thank you once in a while for something that's just absolutely benign.
Mhm.
Thanks for taking the trash out. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Even if it's his job and you had, and it sat there for 3 days. Still anything you can do just to start to change the channel a little bit. It's as simple as making him smile about something.
Makes me think of like scripture, like we're gonna speak life into the
Yes.
situation, even if it looks dead, even if it looks like dry bones, he's the God that brings dry bones back to life. And so I think that sometimes it could be hard. I've been in this situation with my children before where it's like, oh man, you're not seeing any of the fruit that you want or whatever, they're still young, but like not speaking the negative. I had to train myself on that and speaking life and like seeking their heart and knowing their heart and speaking what they're capable of, even if it looks, far away.
Hmm.
Good.
Yeah. Encouraging and suggesting, and things like that.
Mhm.
Hey, let's, instead of, your normal routine might be, come home, eat, watch Netflix, go to sleep. Anything that changes the routine up, saying, hey, why don't we go out? Hey,
Good.
why don't we go for a walk? Hey, why don't we go do
Mhm.
this? Or I'm going to do this. Do you want to go with me?
Yeah.
Things like that, where you're not just going, hey, you know what? You're getting fat. Maybe you should get up off the couch and go for a walk.
Yeah. Right.
Those are
Or
different
just like
sentences.
how much can the woman change the tone in the home? The house gets crazy. Mom's going to come home and roar like a lion. But same with that. Say he does work or he doesn't. And, you're in there. You can invite a warm, smiling atmosphere or not.
Mhm.
And even if they don't deserve it, I know that's the hardest thing. And that's such a sacrificial love. But that's what Jesus would do. And we
Right.
just want to encourage women out there that are dealing with that. It's just relationships are so beautiful, but they can present challenges. But if you get through those things, we know some marriage counselors, Lori and Derek Ammons. She went through a trauma counseling thing at her church, and she just changed. And he noticed. He noticed right away. So it was like she was just in a cycle for so many years, and all of a sudden she just was a new being. Of course, it was God and healing in the mix of that, and their marriage has just resulted in such a beautiful thing just from that.
Yeah.
Um, So another thing I want to talk about too is men's emotions. Before I ask the question, in your podcast, would you prefer people to start, if they did share it with their husbands, to start at podcast number one, or would you go in backwards order, or does it not matter?
I would always say go to episode one and then go wherever you want
Okay.
after that.
Yeah.
Episode one is the origin story. And I think a lot of men resonate with that. It's my most downloaded episode of all of them ever. And that's saying a lot. So
The power of man
yep.
on any
Power of man.
podcast platform. Yeah,
Yep.
that's so good.
Yep.
So talking about man's feelings, which is just taboo. We don't talk about it, or men don't, women do.
Yeah. I'm like, were we? I don't remember
What
talking about
feelings? Oh, feelings.
It took my daughter had cancer. She was diagnosed at 7 weeks old, and it's just a heavy thing. It's heavy for Eric and I. We talked on the phone a little bit ago. We were talking about just people don't realize the heaviness that still is on us. But I remember being in exam, like just outside of these critical exams, where they were going to come out and either say the cancer spread significantly or even into her brain, or we're going to take her eye out. And he's scrolling on YouTube. He's like showing my dad this like baseball thing. And I'm like, you stinking jerk. I'm thinking like, how on earth can you be like looking at that? And I'm sitting here with my Bible open, probably like, honestly, like just, I can't even explain the thoughts, or almost like a deadness in me until I waited. Like time just ticked and stopped. And I prayed and I prayed and I cried and I prayed. So there was a resentment a little bit for several years over like, and then I had miscarriages, and he's like, "Oh, did it happen?" And I was like, "Yes." And I would tear up and he'd be like, "All right," and it's just like, "Oh my gosh, where were you?" It was 3 years later, and it's so sad to me now. And this is why I want to like spread awareness about it. We finally went on an overnighter date, and he told me, he opened up and he's like, "Yeah, I had it out with God in the shower about you and Sadie, and like you don't deserve any of this with your babies, just your other miscarriages and Sadie's situation." And I lost it because I was like, "Do you actually like think about this? Do you actually tear up about this?" And since then, I've discovered he's probably always cried more about it than even I ever did, just in private. And it shattered my heart. And I felt so bad, for him. And it's just like a deep, I guess all just to speed it up, he basically said from the beginning, because I found out by myself in the hospital, he never like came to hug me or hold me, that he couldn't because he would have lost it. I just don't want other women to go through what I went through and think, you go through a hard thing, or where is the man in all of this? Or where's the man even caring about my feelings? And just the situations of life. Do you have any perspective on that?
Nikki's like, "Hey,
I
tell me
know.
about this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Oh, and also this." And then you're like, "Wait, what was the first question?"
Okay. Yeah. So, like I said, I've been on a lot of podcasts and said a lot of things I thought would come back to get me. This might be the most dangerous one I've ever been on in my life. I love the questions. I've never had to answer these questions from, what do you tell the wife or the mom? And so that's very interesting to me. I appreciate being in this position, actually. All of the work that I do is with the dad in that circumstance. So maybe the best way to answer that is, if I'm working with the dad, what is it I think he needs from the mom, type of thing.
Yeah.
And maybe I can answer it that way. It's never easy because everybody's always keeping score. One of the things I always tell men when they start working with me is you have to absolutely throw out the scorebook, because there is no score anymore. And if you're going to keep score, she's going to keep score. It's never going to even out.
Yeah.
The points never work. So you have to just be. You have to just live. And one thing I'm always telling men is that, whenever you're putting deposits in the emotional bank account and people are, making withdrawals and putting them in, that if you want to have a happy marriage, and there's a problem, be the leader of your family and put the deposit in the bank first. Okay. And it's like someone has to lead. You're going to have two people who are sitting there who are not getting along or not communicating. If you both just sit there stubborn and no one's going to move, then nothing's going to change. And so the way that I counsel men is I say, look, someone has to take the first step. Why are you asking your wife to take the first step? That's just not, part of the tenet of being a man. It's just not. Now, it doesn't mean she can't take the first step. It just, if no one's taking one, why aren't you? You're supposed to be leading the situation. When it comes to intimacy and sharing feelings and these types of things, there's a widespread belief amongst men, and I do actually believe it, that you never let them see you weak, and you just don't. I have lived by that for a long time. I've done a lot of episodes on that. I counsel that. Um, my wife and my kids do not need to know that I'm worried about having enough money to pay the electric bill. They need to know if we're not going to have power tomorrow, but they don't need to know that I'm worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is men start to open up and then they open up incorrectly. And we open up and we start to share how that we're worried or we're overwhelmed or we feel like we can't handle something. That doesn't help anybody. And so I teach men how to open up about things that are safe to open up about and that actually start connection by reaching out and asking, how are you feeling? Are you doing okay with this? You can communicate on a feeling level without automatically going into sharing what you're feeling. You can care about what somebody else is feeling, and then you can speak to that. And then you have a much better guide on how to share, what to share, those types of things. In most cases, and I know this for a fact, my wife, my daughter especially, but even to some degree my sons, they would rather see me die on my horse than fall off of it. They can't handle that.
Is there
When
an
we went,
outlet for them that you recommend?
it's a brotherhood of men,
Yeah.
and that's really the thing. What we do in ours is in all ways, is guys can talk about whatever you want to talk about because you're not being judged anymore. When you're talking to another man who's going through a similar issue, and he's not paying your bills, you're not paying his. You're not responsible for getting them to whatever camp it is, or buying whatever products the family needs, paying the rent. Then there's no judgment between men in that area. And you can literally just let it all out. And then guys can go, hey, you know what? I hear you. I was worried about that too. Have you tried this? Then it's just free, open suggestions from peers. And it's all received better. It's sent out better. When you get it from your wife, there's the underlying, that we feel anyway, there's the underlying emotion of, I'm not good enough. And that's why she's telling me all these things that I'm doing wrong. And then all you're trying to do is say, hey, I need these things handled because you're trying to run a family and take care of it. All we hear is, you're not good enough. You're not enough. What you're doing doesn't work. You're a failure. So it's very difficult. The best things that I think the wife in that situation can do is encourage him to get into a men's group,
Yeah.
to find male mentorship, because, and don't say, you need to go get a men's group so that you can get in touch with your feelings. Yeah. Have you thought about this? I have this and it does a lot for me. I'm in Aligned Mommas. I think it's
It's
awesome,
exactly
right?
what we're doing,
So,
honestly. Like it
yeah.
literally, and where there's abundance of counselors, right? It's so biblical too. And it is true. There's things that Samantha and I talk about that we wouldn't talk about with our husbands. Number one, they wouldn't care, like a different thing. But we need to, as women, we need to express certain things and have a good listening ear. Where do men find groups like this? Or is there a virtual world out there?
Unfortunately, a lot of it's online, that you find that it's almost all virtual world. There's very little in-person stuff for men. And a big part of that is because we're not going to take time away from our family, time away from our job, time away from any activity we might actually be doing to
Yeah.
go sit in a men's group. Now, if I have an hour between 10 and 11 o'clock at night when my wife's asleep and my kids are asleep and I haven't gone to bed yet, am I going to go online and get into my men's group and, type and chat and everything else about some of the things going on in my life? Yeah, now I'm in a safe space. There's more anonymity online. I can do that.
Hmm.
I've seen women's groups who work very well in person,
Yeah.
and I've also seen them work online. I've seen men's groups work very well online, and I've almost never seen one work long term in person.
Hmm.
Just does not work. Because even when we get right down to it and we join the group and we start to type and we start to share, we're still not staring at the other guy. We're not in the room with this other guy, you know?
Yeah.
And, men worry about all this other stuff. Is this guy bigger than me? Am I too fat? When I look, what do I look like? I mean, we worry about all the same stuff that you guys worry about, believe
Yeah,
it or not.
we don't know. You guys
We just
Yeah.
don't
never
tell
say
anybody.
it. You just act cool, calm, collected until you're not, you know?
We would never say that out loud
Yeah.
to anyone.
Another hard on the spot question. What do you think makes a good Christian man?
Great question.
Man. No, I'm just kidding.
What's that, Samantha?
I said he's married and he's a man. No,
That's where it starts. That's where it starts. I think I mean, there are some deep answers to that I think are important. There are tenets of, the power man movement that we do that matter. The first one that I would say is that if you are a card carrying Christian man and that's what you want to be and that's important to you, I think the first thing is that you need to be able to say that out loud. I think you have to be able to say, I'm a Christian man and I'm proud of it, instead of hiding and apologizing. Because when you can't talk about God, when you are apologizing for God, when you're apologizing for your faith, when you're hiding that, you're hiding who you are. You're hiding the biggest thing you believe in your life. And there's no way then to step out in the front and put your chest out and be proud of being who you are if the most powerful force in your whole life you're ashamed of. So I would start there. The second thing that I would say is one of the tenets that we have is the people who depend on you have to be more important to you than you are to you.
Wow.
I get a lot of grief for that online, and I have never stepped away from it because all I hear is, oh, you got to put your mask on first before you can help everybody else, and you got to fill your cup before you do that. That works great for everybody except the man in the equation. It just does not work. Yes, I have to be able to breathe on the airplane. So I have to put on my mask first. That's not what we're talking about 99.9% of the time.
Yeah.
You go back to the chicken analogy. There's 4 people at the table and you have 3 pieces of chicken. Someone's not eating.
I mean,
You've got to take that on.
If the marriage is representing Christ in the church and you're the head, like you're like displaying the sacrificial love of Christ, really. And you're called to the highest level, right? Because you are the head of the household. I don't know. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I honestly,
and
yes,
difficult.
You nailed it right on the head. Sacrificing your desires, your needs for those of others is godly already, but you have a special sort of responsibility to the people that depend on you directly. And you are the one who caused the situation where they depend on you directly. I asked you to marry me. Now you depend on me.
Mm-hmm.
I brought these kids into the world. They depend on me. There isn't an option B. There isn't someone else who's going to step up and take care of them if I don't. And so when you accept that and you say, no matter what it is, and no matter what I have to give up, as long as they're more important to me than I am to me, it's amazing how things work out. And I don't end up having to do without very often.
Mm-hmm.
I've just made sure that no one's doing without and they're being taken care of first.
There's even
So I think
studies
that's
out there
really, really important.
where it's married men that are providing for their families, are like on the happiness scale. If they can actually identify that, we're happier because they were married to one woman and they were actually the provider for the family. So
I would agree with that 100%.
It's just
100%.
you're in line with how you were created, right? Just like us managing the home and nurturing,
Yeah. Everything that you just said there is an equation for success and is something that men take pride in. Men don't go off and become alcoholics because they're happy about what they're doing. They go and do that because they feel like they've failed and they have no other option.
Mm-hmm.
Men don't go out looking for multiple women or additional women or someone on the side or anything like that if they're successful in their marriage.
Yeah.
They do that when they've failed in the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And very often it's not that their wife has failed them. It's that they have failed in the marriage and they need to go somewhere else where the new person doesn't know that they've failed.
Wow.
They can create a new story. There are a lot of studies out there right now for, unfortunately, this sort of thing, where the other woman doesn't even know half of what's happened with the man. She gets the new, improved version because he gets to recreate himself in this fantasy world.
Yeah.
And the only reason he shies away from his wife in the first place is because he's ashamed of not producing. So when men provide, when they protect, when they lead, they're almost always happier in general. And their marriages work and their families work and they're closer to God. So all of those things go together.
That's so good.
I have a question. So do you have any, maybe like a top 3 tips for wives of maybe what a man needs from his wife, or
That's
things
good.
that we might think is not that important, but really to a man perspective, it's huge, or any advice in that in being a wife.
Yes. Wow. Here we go again. I'm going to end up.
We don't get men on that, we just profess God, on the podcast enough. So we're gonna
So
just.
we take
How
all our
much time do
questions
you
for you
have? No, I'm just
too.
kidding.
No, I'm just kidding.
I just feel blessed that I get to help with this situation. So thank you for bringing me on today. Yeah. Yes. So three pieces of advice for women on things that you can do to help out your man that you may not know
Mhm.
actually matter to him, type of thing. Am I close on the question?
Oh yeah.
Pretty good. Okay. All right. The very first thing is acknowledgement and appreciation. And that may sound, ridiculous, but the smallest gesture of thank you for that, or that meant a lot, or, I really enjoyed that. Um, there are a lot of guys I know that get their wives flowers, right? And, oh, thank you. And they never say another word about them. And the flowers sit on the counter and die. Whereas I know that with my wife, I buy her flowers, and I know doggone good and well that at least once a day, she's going to tell me how much she loves those flowers.
Aw.
Aw.
And it
Now, my
makes you
wife
feel
is,
so special.
yes. Now,
Yeah.
my wife's sharp as a tack and figured me out about 3 decades ago. So she's probably doing it because she knows I need it. But I
Good
love that.
example. I'll
And
sneak one in.
sure.
We had a baseball game last night, and my husband is really sweet. He's like a manly man, but he's also just like sweet and gentle. So last night we split a pork steak at a baseball game, and he's sitting there like talking to one of his buddies and cutting it up and like handing me the fork with cut ups like meat on it. And I told him last night, I was like, that was like so like masculine and tender and sweet. And I just like that just made me feel so special. And so I'm hopeful that he was thankful that I acknowledged it because man, I thought it was the sweetest thing. So
I guarantee you he was thankful that you acknowledged it. I guarantee you. That's an awful lot of work to go through on a pork
the
steak.
new joke while we've been married 18 years is how much I actually need him. I'm always like, I don't need you. I'll joke about it and I'll call him like 2 minutes later, like, hey, is the tornado gonna kill us? Like and he's like, yeah, you need me way too much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one though. That's absolutely that's the point exactly. Men need that. They need that affirmation, even on the small little things, but especially if they've made a gesture. If they go out of their way to make a gesture, just the smallest repetitive, acknowledgement of it, then they know it was the right thing to do. And then guess what? They're going to do more of that. They're going to make more gestures. I
Yeah.
guarantee you.
It's not rocket
The
science.
It's really not. The more you appreciate the gesture, the more gestures you're gonna get. So go with it.
Yeah.
We're not tough to figure out. We're really
Yeah.
not. So that's the first one. The second one, and these are really not in any kind of order because honestly, the second one probably is the most important, and that's physical touch. And I don't mean anything vulgar by that, but something as simple as if I'm sitting on the couch and my wife comes over, to sit next to me, she'll lean into me, or she'll put her arms around my arm, or she'll sit next to me on the other side of the couch, but she'll put her feet up on me, or put them under me or behind me or something. Just some little, just touch of some kind. And it's the smallest little thing. She'll walk past me in the kitchen and she'll just put her hand on my shoulder and like it goes across my shoulders while she walks across the kitchen. That might seem like the dumbest thing in the whole world, but I notice it immediately
Yeah.
and it actually makes me smile. It makes me feel a bit better.
Mhm.
Um, she initiates a hug with me, or something. And I didn't have to go hug her. I didn't have to make every effort on everything when it comes to being physical in any way. That is so appreciated by men. And it can be
Yeah.
the smallest, goofiest little thing. You're laying in bed and she reaches her foot over and,
Mhm.
kicks mine, on
Yeah.
purpose, playfully.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, it just happened 2 days ago. I'm still thinking of it right now. So all of those little things like that are huge.
Yeah.
Just
Kick feet. Oh, got it. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kick his
Wow.
foot.
What was that for?
Remember, we were laying in bed at the time, so don't do it when he's walking through the kitchen. Samantha's husband shows up, with crutches next week, and it's my fault. So, those are huge, and any sort of gesture, on your part. And those don't need to be huge. And it's not about buying something or
Mhm.
anything like that. My wife, for instance, I wear a black hoodie all the time from Till Valhalla Project, and on the back it says, don't let the bad days win." And it's just my favorite sweatshirt. I wear it all the time. She's always making sure whenever she's doing any kind of laundry, she's like, "Hey, do I need to grab that sweatshirt for you?"
Aw.
Aw.
Because otherwise, I'm going to leave it hanging in the closet till it walks to the laundry itself.
Mhm.
Okay, it's just how I am. But she's always thinking about, do I need that?
Aw.
When
Yeah.
she's, if she's working on the dishes instead of me that day, she's like, "Hey, does your Lion coffee cup for that show, or does, your IU cup for that show need to be washed, or is it still okay for another 15,
Aw.
uses?"
Yeah.
It's the smallest gesture, and it's not about spending money, and it's not about like going out, and it's not about grandiose or dressing up. It's
But
just,
it was directly to you. That's what I found out. We've
yeah,
said this a million times on the podcast, and maybe somebody needs to hear it again. I was like running circles around the house and making sure the house was good and the kids were good and everything and was in order and the kids were where they needed to be. And I thought that meant I was doing it for my husband. But it was like, whoa, Epiphany, what are you actually doing specifically for him? And so since then, I try to do lots of the things that you mentioned. Within the last year, I try to scratch his head at night, even if I'm so tired, even if it's only for 4 minutes, just a little thing of like, I love you, I see you, I'm thankful for you. And I think it moves mountains, those little things like you're mentioning.
yeah. As men, we live our lives in quiet desperation, so to speak. That's the quote everybody loves so much. But we really do live unappreciated lives.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is we wear, like a badge of honor on our arm because, we're willing to make the sacrifice. If I'm not going to eat tonight, and because we don't have enough food, but I know my kids are eating, I know my wife's eating, and I'm just not going to eat anything because I want to make sure that we're saving for later. And I've been in that spot. I've been in that spot where I had to go give blood to make money, to go buy groceries, to feed the kids that night.
Hmm.
We've been there. So if I'm making that sacrifice, I feel good about that sacrifice that I've made. I don't need it to be acknowledged necessarily.
Yeah.
But in not acknowledging that, I'm taking that on, and that's great. But my whole life becomes that way. From work, no one ever tells you you're doing a good job.
Hmm.
It's what you get paid for. Go to work.
Yeah.
Nobody cares that you're taking the kids to baseball or doing whatever else you're doing because you know what? You signed them up. All
Yeah.
right, go, right? So we really don't get that. And so just the smallest single thing from you guys is so giant because we didn't ask for it.
Yeah.
If we have to ask for it, then it has no value. But when you don't ask for it and you get it anyway, that makes you feel better
Hmm.
about everything you've done the whole day than just about anything else. So yeah, and when you combine
Yeah.
them and the
Yeah.
appreciation and the gesture and all that is
Physical
actual some
touch.
physical touch, you know what? Hey,
Yeah. It
thumbs
just
up all the way
boils
around.
down to, yeah, date your spouse, I think, really. Um, I don't know. I think that women sometimes when we're mothering and we have kids and we're doing all this stuff, I found myself there, where you just like you're in the messy bun all day, you never get put together. And so I hit this point of like, oh man, I like even if it's right before my husband gets home, I like get dressed up, not dressed up, but like look cute, not like crazy or anything, but just like going back to like dating each other. It goes like both ways, I think. What did you do in the
Yeah,
beginning?
Yeah.
And we
yeah,
can get
it's a
lost
great
in that.
analogy. Yeah,
So,
She's the queen of that. He'll get home late from work and she'll have like a bubble bath and a drink and food like near the bath. I'm like, shut up, girl. I hate you. No, I'm just kidding.
really?
No, no, she's really, really thoughtful in that.
he's
Their
probably like,
Oh,
marriage is
why
that's
do
very
you have
strong.
to tell everyone that I took a bubble bath? It's an Epsom salt bath
Yeah,
because
yeah. He
laborious
might have been
work.
sore, okay?
Yeah.
But it is. It's just the intentional things. It can be
Yeah.
so many
yeah,
different ways. So,
yeah. If he's taking an Epsom salt bath, that's one thing. But I mean, if he's taking a bubble bath, don't let that get out to guys because
It actually really is an Epsom salt bath, but. He's actually still like, I don't care. Tell him I took a bubble bath.
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I'm sure if I was the one in the bubble bath, I'd probably be so happy about it. I wouldn't care either. So
Yeah.
that's right. It's only us out here that are jealous of that are going to make fun of
Yeah.
him. So he's winning no matter what. No, that's funny.
So
That's
to
awesome.
end with a final question, we or just like a plug, we know that you have just taken on a new podcast called Wake Up the Lions, and it
Mhm.
is something like extraordinarily bold. So you've gone from just, kind of like being a faithful man and doing your thing to like you feel called to something bigger. And so
Mhm.
can you explain what your podcast is about and the inspiration behind it and how it's going?
Yes, to all of those points. Um, yeah, I've done Power Man for 6 years. I've done several other podcasts that have come and gone. I've done Podcaster Nation now for about 100 episodes. Um, your episode, by the way, is going to be number 100, just so you know. It
Oh,
comes out
Oh,
later this week.
wow.
yay.
Right.
That's cool.
We're getting close
So
to ours.
I,
Yours might be 99.
it,
It's 98.
Is it 98? Okay.
look at you guys. So, so I've been doing this for a long time. And as I've been doing this, I've had countless people come on all of my podcasts and say, um, is it okay to talk about God here? And, our podcast,
Mhm.
you folks mentioned faith a couple times, but you weren't really sure if it was okay to talk about, right? And then when I embraced it and asked you about it, then it was great. And everybody was really happy that we were able to talk about it. That podcast actually was one of the things that kind of got me moving towards it. Actually, I had a really good time talking to you guys about that. And I had all this other stuff in my head that was already brewing. And I finally stopped and I said, no one who is a Christian should ever have to ask that question,
Mhm.
ever. And finally, I had a pastor
Good.
come on, Power Man. And he said, is it okay to talk about God or do we have to tone down the God thing? And I said, this is a pastor
Yeah.
Yeah.
who
Like, why are
can't
we doing
talk.
this? Yeah.
What in the world is going on? And I just said, you know what? This is crazy. Um, I had a guest on, and he said to me, this is not, he said, Christianity is not today the way it was when I grew up.
Mhm.
And he said, if you walk into a Christian bookstore today, you see, meadows and flowers and lambs and all this other fun stuff. And it's all nice and peaceful and
Mhm.
passive. And he said, when I grew up, there were lions, there were tigers,
Mhm.
there was, Samson, killing hundreds of
Mhm.
soldiers with a jawbone, Sure, Moses parted the Red Sea, but he also dropped it on several thousand Egyptians. It was like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't just
there,
peace and butterflies and
no,
Yeah.
yeah.
it was a battle,
Mhm.
for what was right. And all of these things came into my head, and I woke up one day and I said, there really should be something done about this. And it was as if God sort of just slapped me in the head. I mean, my eyes welled up, and I got this, sort of tingling on my spine and the whole bit. And I
Holy
looked at my wife.
Spirit.
It
Mhm.
really was. And I looked at my wife and I said, "Why am I not doing this?" Now,
Yeah.
keep in mind, I hadn't been talking to her about anything, so she's like, "What are you talking about?"
Mhm.
But I told her, I filled her in, and I said, "Why am I not doing this?" And she goes, I don't know, but I bet you're gonna. And I said, I'm starting it right now.
I love
And
that.
I just started it. And so the whole idea is to bring out the lions of God and
Yeah.
say, hey,
Yeah.
are you willing to talk about your faith? Are you willing to talk about it loudly? Are you willing to proclaim it to everybody else? And are you willing to help build a discipleship one person at a time? And if you are, I want to hear your story. I want to spread your message. And that's what this podcast is for. It has absolutely taken hold and taken off,
Yeah.
even through all of the immense
Awesome.
hate that we've gotten so far, which is just funny to me.
It's crazy, isn't
So,
it?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
gosh, well, how much will
Mhm.
God bless it? And even we were prayed over one time and they said if you divert from God, it'll dry up. And we were like, "Oh,
Mhm.
yes, you're right." But I mean, that even
Yeah.
encourages us too because maybe when we have and we've been interviewed by like newspapers and different things too, we should not shy away from it. Now
Yeah.
there is I don't know if there's a discernment of a balance between like speaking it but not, like for example, on our community page, we don't have like Christian community page, we have like, building friendships or
Mhm.
whatever we have. And then inside every two posts, probably every post we have,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
you can
But
tell who we are. So I don't know if it's discernment or what.
I feel
Yeah.
like God is calling a boldness out. I don't know. That's always been laying on my heart like never before. And if you know me like on a personal level, I am very non-confrontational, very, I don't know, timid and quiet. And I feel like God's been like making me more bold and just like speaking out on things I normally wouldn't, or I would shy away from or be nervous. But I'm like, now more than ever, the body of Christ needs to be bold and courageous, and we need to take it firm and stand on the biblical foundation and not be weak and not be shut down by the world. And I think that's maybe why we've gotten here, because we've been so
Yes.
worried about hurting feelings. But I've been doing the Bible in a year and reading through Old Testament and stuff. I'm like, oh, he was not meek by any means, worshiping false God.
Yeah.
Is a
Yeah.
that harsh. Like, he is full of grace and mercy and love, but there is also
He's fully
the
just.
righteousness.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I
One
love
of
that
her
100%.
you're doing
posts,
that.
she texted me and she
Thank
was
you.
like, "Hey, I saw this beautiful double rainbow outside of our house the other day." And she's like, "I really want to post like the truth behind the rainbow and whatnot." And so she made this beautiful post, and I was like, "Go, girl, go." And I think that was like our most shared post on that page. I
Yeah.
don't know if we have the stats on that, but it's like I think other people are hungry for it too. And so
Mhm.
what you're doing, Rory, is incredible. And I think are we in the end times? Like it does seem like God is amassing just like some really strong people. We know some women in our lives that are just seem to be rising up and just being taking arrows, and standing so firm in their faith. So we're really proud of what you're doing. And honestly, you're encouraging us too. I mean, that was just something
Mhm.
we didn't really
Yeah.
think about. Just like she's like, I just feel like God's saying go more bold. And we're in interviews to be like, yeah, well, it's God, but like, no, we need to be more bold in that. And I know God blesses it.
There's if I can, just one last thing
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of talk about that, the end of times and that sort of thing. And if you just sort of like look out the window at what's been happening in our country and around the world, you would think if ever there was a time where it's the end of time coming, this is it.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. I just really don't, because I've seen some other things. I have two young sons that are extremely devout in their faith among, in their lives. And I mean, they're incredible young men that are leaders. And the men that follow them already are growing and growing and growing in number. There are an immense amount of young lions, men and women,
Hmm.
that are coming to the forefront today. Folks who were quiet Christians yesterday are speaking out louder than ever before. And so, with that movement, I think that the army that's being amassed is an army that's meant for victory, not an army that's going to result in the end. And I just think we're
Yeah.
at a point now where, we're being
It's
called
like where
to
the
keep it
laborers
back.
out. I think exactly.
Yeah,
Whether it is the end or it's not, there is the movement. God is,
yeah,
even over in the Middle East, like so many Muslims are having dreams about Jesus. There is an active movement. I believe my daughter is going to be healed sometime in the future of her vision loss and her blindness in that right time. Because I feel like the signs and wonder. You feel like God is rumbling.
yeah. There's a lot going on. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Mhm.
the podcast is really what that group of young lions is missing, unfortunately, is leadership.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, more than anything, the Wake Up the Lions movement is to wake up leadership and
Mhm.
say these young lions need someone to go through that wall first
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
show them what needs to be done. Otherwise, this whole movement is going to continue to rise until it stops,
Yeah.
and then it's going to fade because without the leadership to take it over the line, it's going to be like everything else. It's going to be like motivation. Feels real good today, and then tomorrow you wake up and it's gone. So we need leaders, and we
Yeah.
need people who have taught everyone else you need to be quiet and not offend to
Mhm.
stop that and stand
Yeah.
up and say, look, I'm not offending anybody. This is who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't care who you are and what you do. Power
Yeah.
to you.
Mhm.
I hope you're happy.
Yeah.
But this is who I am, and I'm
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
stop apologizing for it. So,
Yeah.
Amen.
yeah, I hope that
Very
message
good.
gets out there more. And I need to have both of you guys on. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know
we
what
are
the
gonna
holdup
book
is,
here
but
soon. I know. I know. Life.
right.
Well, thank you so very
Yeah.
much
Thank
for joining
you.
us. We'll gladly be on your podcast here, hopefully sometime soon. We're really
Mhm.
grateful. Really
Well,
grateful.
all the women out there
Yeah,
should tell their
thank
men to
you.
go join Power of Man Within, and
Yeah.
then they're going to get better, and then the women are going to be happier, and everything's going to work out well. So,
Do you talk
Amen.
about faith in that too?
oh yeah,
Okay, that's good.
Awesome.
And we
Absolutely.
will link it in the podcast description. So if you're listening in and you need a link directly there, we will also link that. So
Awesome.
Thank you
Thank you
so
both.
much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate
Appreciate it.
it. See you
see you
next
next
time,
time,
Mama.
mamas.
You're supposed to say it.
We
I
actually
didn't
like the bloopers too.
I didn't know if I was supposed to say it or not. I thought I was just sitting here while you said it.